Today is the last day of the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not covet. Paul over in Philippians chapter 4 says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord, that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you have been concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. We live in a society where our senses are triggered all the time by material things, by the ads that we see everywhere we look. A person I know yesterday posted a rather large home on the internet that's for sale. It was 5-bedroom, 3-bath, living room, family room, 2.5-car garage, an office space off of the living room. I thought, wow, wouldn't that be a nice house? And I sent them a message right back and said, are you guys moving? And 2 or 3 other people that knows this person said the same thing, and I went, no, I'm quite happy with the house that we're in. This is above my pay grade, the cost of this house. It's just a friend of mine is moving, and I'm just putting it out there just to help them get it on Facebook a little bit more, that their house is for sale. But my first reaction was, wouldn't it be nice to have a house that big? Thou shalt, Barb's going, no, too much to clean, too many big bills. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. It's easy to look around at people's family situations. And as a man, it's easy to look and say to another guy saying, your wife is always so happy and cheerful. Her hair's always done up so nice. She always has the nicest clothes on. She's always so just mild-mannered and friendly. Kurt's pointing to Judy, saying, yeah, this is my wife. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. It's easy to look at your neighbor and all the things that they have, their toys, their modern cars, their whatever, and wish you had them. Thou shalt not covet anything thy neighbor has. It's nice to look at people who have people who take care of things for them. I remember some years ago we were getting into a project in a church, and one of the guys who came to church said, I have a person who can order all these supplies that we need and get them for us real cheap. And I thought, that's nice to have a person who can do all those things for you. And then I discovered the prices that I could go to the local hardware store and get the stuff on sale cheaper. He was actually wasting money. I look around at people who have someone who cleans their house and who cooks their meals and who meets their every need, and you think that would be nice at times. But I would hate to have to pre-clean my house so the person who comes in to clean it would not know that I'm a slob in real life. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's servants, whether they're paying for them or they own them or anything else. Thou shalt not covet. I used to look at other churches that had big mowers that would mow their grass quick and think, boy, wouldn't that be nice? And then it happened here, and grass cutting doesn't take 6 hours anymore. It only takes 2. Hint, 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 hint. These college guys that aren't here today will take care of it now. You shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor, anything your neighbor has, anything your neighbor's involved in, anything your neighbor thinks, or anything else. To covet is to feel a strong desire for another person's possessions. Generally, just generally having a craving for possessions in general. Someone has said that coveting leads to destruction. Think about Eve. She just had to have that apple. Someone said it was the latest, greatest computer and only had one bite. And failed after the first bite was done. David had to have his neighbor's wife. Cain coveted the favorable position that Abel had with God and did what? Committed murder. I'm looking at this thing of covet. And as I look at covet, I'm thinking, if I'm coveting something, I'm apt to steal because I want it so bad. And I'm looking at the Cain and Abel situation and thinking, if I want something so bad, I'm apt to commit murder to do it. Not just necessarily physical murder, but maybe even murder of a reputation or of someone's spirit to get what I want so desperately. And so as I keep looking at these 10 Commandments, I see that they're just all intertwined. If I want something so desperately, I'm apt to lie to get it. And so if I can settle the question that I'm going to live content and not covet anything, that's going to help me with the rest of those commandments in there. Do not covet. This 10th commandment is aimed directly at the heart and the mind of every person. It's not discussing how we should act. It's discussing how we should look deep within ourselves to how we think, what we are on the inside, how content we are with life. It gets down to our motives that define who and what we are. Mark chapter 7 says, For from within, out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. All these things come from within and defile a man or a woman, a human being. The 10 Commandments define the love of God. They define our relationship with God. They also define our relationship with others. And with that commandment, or with the commandments, they end with something that defines the wellspring, the foundation of our relationship problems. Coveting. You see, if I want what you have, I'm apt to do anything to you as possible to get what you have. Not the same thing you have, not something like what you have, but what you have. If the only way I can think of to get what you have is to steal it from you, then that leaves a big empty part in your life because what you had is gone. It gets down to the foundation of my relationships. Do I respect you enough to leave your stuff alone? Thou shalt not covet. This world we live in, I already mentioned, has too many things reaching out to our senses. The whole scenario is designed to get us to want and to purchase. Did you know that marketing departments spend hours and hours and hours studying how to entice people? Now, I noticed something here just recently. They get all these people dressed up really nice. Man, woman, either way. They'll get them looking just perfect because they want things to appeal to people. And so if you can get some shapely woman dressed just appropriately to where her shapeliness is showing, some man's going to have his attention drawn to that commercial, and whether it's for a car or whether it's for clothing or whether it's for a new house or anything, his attention is going to be drawn not necessarily to the thing that he's wanting to buy, but to that person that's selling it, and then the two of us get associated together. And when we start seeing all this marketing stuff, it begins to entice us that, I want that. I need that. I have to have that. How am I going to get the money to purchase that? How am I going to find a way to have that thing in my life? Someone even pointed out here lately that they're beginning to do that with church stuff. Are you ready for this one? I heard this, and then we went to a conference a few weeks ago, and I watched it. I watched it in front of my eyes. Pastors coming up to talk about various things who had been into working out, and their muscles were built, and they had short sleeve shirts on, and their muscles were bulging and showing, and they would get people's attention, the women's attention, because here's this strong man up in front talking. And they would get some shapely woman to come up with a very nice business outfit on, and as she's talking, that gets people's attention just by her movements, by what she's saying. You see, the whole thing is designed to entice people to want what they're selling or what they're promoting. And that's not all bad unless it becomes coveting to where we have to have it so bad that we're frustrated if we don't get it. And then our prayers to God become more of a gift list, a wish list, a want, I have to have it, then rather than praise and reaching out to Him just because of who He is. We become like a kid in a candy store. I was joking around with Dr. McCain after he was here with us a few weeks ago. We went to, what's that restaurant? Golden Corral, the new thing there, and he had never been there before. He was like a kid in a toy store, walking around looking at all, Anne's laughing, she was there, looking at all that food and all those desserts, and I told him, I said, Larry, the only other time I've seen you like that was one night when you and I were in Menards together looking for some stuff for your house shortly after you moved here. You were like a kid in a toy store looking at all the stuff that was in that store. That's the way we get. When all this marketing and all this advertising comes at us, we become like kids in a toy store, all the things we can want, and just, I want. And then we eat too much. And then we're miserable. I have this big list of wants. Some of them have actually happened. Years ago, I wanted a large screen TV. They got cheap enough to where I could have finally afford one, and the old one I just knew was about ready to die. It's still in use at our cottage, by the way. I used to think I had to have a new car every 2 years. I grew up with that. My dad used to get a new car every 2 years. He leases them. You got to replace them after 2 years. I'm on 4 years with this one, and the last one was 7 years. And I've gotten to the place to where I really don't care. I want to get the thing paid off and hope it'll go another 10 years or so. I used to want the latest electronic gizmo. You know, my phone's 2 years old. And, you know, it's designed to where they want you to trade that phone in every 2 years. And I'm getting all these advertisements about the latest and greatest. And I'm thinking, but the phone's 2 years old and it's paid off. And the phone bill's going to go down $89 a month. I kind of like that. That kind of helps take care of that thou shalt not covet the latest, greatest thing. You see, if you can start settling this thing to where the sales papers don't entice you every Sunday, to where they don't frustrate you every week. If you can take Paul's thing of I'm content, then you can stop trying to keep up with the Joneses. I've been trying to figure out who the Joneses are and why it's so important to keep up with them in the first place. If anybody can help me with that, I'd be so grateful. I look at all the things that we have. You know, most of us in this country have it pretty good. We have places to stay. We have beds to sleep in at night. We have entertainment right there in front of us. We have clothes to wear. We have food on our tables. I don't believe it's a sin to have nice things or to want nice things. The sin comes in how we go about getting them. Does it become coveting? Or does it become just because God has blessed us, because we're living for Him, because we've become generous? I look at some different thoughts here on coveting. Coveting is not simply desiring something we do not have. It is to be devoured by a desire for something that is not ours. Coveting is not simply desiring something we do not have. It is being devoured by a desire for something that is not ours. 2 Samuel around chapter 11 talks about David and Bathsheba. You know the story. He was standing looking out his window, and there was Bathsheba taking a bath on her balcony. Why she was taking a bath on her balcony in the first place is beyond me. Unless it was a hot tub and she was going to get in it. But David looked. He started comparing. He probably in his mind started complaining about what he had and how much better that looked from a distance. He had to have it. And you know the story. Coveting led to an unwanted child, led to a murder that didn't really look like a murder, because he looked and was devoured by a desire for something that wasn't his. I drive around our neighborhood and I see all these yards that have this beautiful green grass in them. Our yard looks horrible. Our backyard looks wonderful. Probably because we had a dog for a while. But our front yard looks horrible. It's this hard clay. There's this big evergreen tree in the front that I think sucks up all the moisture so the grass can't grow if it wanted to. I have planted so much grass seed out in that front yard down through the years. I've gone out there and scraped the soil up, and I've done everything I can think of to get grass to grow out there, and it just will not grow. And so I look at other people's yards and I think, boy, their yard looks so nice. And then I'll go stand in my neighbor's yard and talk to my neighbor and realize how crummy their yard looks when you get in it and how nice my yard looks from a distance. When we start comparing, we need to actually stop and sit down and look and see what that other person has and all the problems they have, and be thankful for what we have. I had to go yesterday and check out something for the District Church Properties Board. Now, you know, folks, I walk in our building once in a while and I look around and I think, boy, this needs to be fixed, and that needs to be fixed, and the other thing needs to be fixed. You know, it's an old building. It was built in what, 1966? And she's got some problems. Well, let me tell you, after I spent an hour in this other building yesterday, I had a headache from the mold in the building. And I left thinking, Lord, thank you for what we have. It may have some problems, but Lord, thank you. Thank you for what we have. Yeah, we're going to try to help this other church as a district, as a church properties board, but wow. Could we just stop and look at what we have and stop comparing it to others and just say, Lord, thank you for what you've given me. That would put a big stop even to the temptation of coveting, of wanting other things. I look at other people's yards and I've decided that maybe the reasons their yards look better is because they water them and I just spit on mine. Sometimes we just need to take care of what we have. I think a lot of our unhappiness comes because we compare ourselves with others. So I think part of this coveting is this whole thing of being content. Stop the comparing. Be grateful for what you have. I'm looking at something else here, what Paul had to say, and I turned to 1 Corinthians 12:31, and the verses before that are talking about spiritual gifts. You know, even in the church, we can look at somebody who gets up and sings real well and think, boy, I wish I could sing like they did. And because we can't sing, all we do is you know, they goofed up on one verse in that song, and it nearly ruined the whole spirit. What's wrong with them? Or they coughed during one verse, and that's just on call. You know, we can get so critical because we can't do it, and they can. And that I think becomes part of coveting. We look at a person who can just go out and just have the compassion to deal with people who are in trouble and have the patience to do that. And criticize everything that they do because we can't do it. But because they're not willing to clean the church toilet or to scrub a floor or to cut the grass or paint a wall, when they do that, we grumble about what they do because we're not willing to do those things ourselves. And so I sometimes think part of coveting becomes, I can't do it, therefore I wished I could, therefore I'm going to try to discourage them through little things. Don't throw your tomatoes at me, please. Unless they're good. I don't need the rotten ones. Anyhow, Paul's talking about spiritual gifts. He's talking about how different people in the church can do different things. And he says we can count those things as glory to God, the gifts that He's given us. But then he says in 1 Corinthians 12:31, eagerly desire the best gifts. Somebody else maybe can sing and you can't. Somebody else may have this deep compassion for others and you can't. You might be able to run the floor scrubber and scrub a floor, and somebody else doesn't have the strength to do it. But desire the greatest gift. And then it goes into chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians. Love. The greatest of all the gifts is love. And you see, if I can get that love in my life, if I can get into my life that God's love just came down to me out of heaven and just touched my life and made that wonderful change in my life that brought joy and brought peace and brought some amazingly great changes, then I can learn to be grateful and I can learn, as Paul says, to be content in any circumstance. Billy Graham said, envy takes the joy, happiness, and contentment out of living. Wow, think about that. If I begin envying something, if I begin envying somebody else, I start losing my contentedness. I start losing my happiness. I start losing my joy. I start losing my peace. Paul says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty, but I have learned to be content through the mighty power of Jesus Christ. Him in my life, meeting my needs. I read a book not too long ago, and it was one of the chapters was talking about contented living. I call it personal satisfaction. In this book, they said there's 9 requisites for contented living. Health enough to make work a pleasure. Well, let's face it, if you're in aches and pains all day long, no matter what you do, it's going to be drudgery. Well, Lord, give me health enough to keep going. Wealth enough to support your needs. Well, what are my basic needs? Food, clothing, shelter. Is anybody here starving to death? Does anybody here not have clothes? Does anybody here not have some kind of a roof over your heads? We're wealthy because God has met those needs. Strength enough to battle the difficulties of life and forsake them. Let's face it, every day we go through difficulties. Every day something can come and blindside us. Every day we can look at another person and think how easy their life is till you sit down and talk to them and find out all the garbage that they're going through as well. And so contentedness becomes, Lord, thank you. Thank you for the grace you've given me that is sufficient enough to keep me going through my weaknesses and through all the stuff that happens. We need grace enough to confess our sins, our shortcomings, and to overcome them. We need patience enough to toil until some good is accomplished. You know, several places in the Bible where it talks about not giving up, keep pressing forward, keep working the good work that God has called you to do in your lives. And yet there's times in our lives where things just are so tough that we just want to sit down and crawl in bed and lay there in the fetal position and cry. But contentedness keeps us going until we see the good being accomplished, that then encourages us to keep going some more. We need charity to see some good in our neighbor. We need love enough to make ourselves useful and helpful to others. Faith enough to make faith enough to make real the things of God. And then, when we're living all these 10 commandments, hope enough to remove all the anxious fears concerning the future. You see, if I can live for God, if I can do all the things that He wants and needs me to do, if I can live according to His precepts, according to His commands, according to what He has put inside of my life, then I have peace and I have hope and I have joy. And I don't have to covet because I'm content with what I have, with what God has given me. No other gods, no graven images. Keeping time holy, not just the Sabbath day, but the whole week. Not taking God's name in vain. Honoring my parents. Not committing adultery. Not stealing. Not killing. Not bearing false witness. Not coveting. All part of my non-negotiable, unalterable terms of my life that keep me dead center in my walk for Jesus Christ. Father, as we leave this place today, I ask for your mighty power to go with us, for your strength as we live this life that will keep us full of your joy and moving forward every day, growing spiritually and letting people see your glory living through us and us giving glory back to you. Father, we honor you today. We give you glory and praise.